Waterfall, the CCW podcast.
Welcome back to the Waterfall podcast, where we dive into the stories, ideas, and the innovations that are going to be shaping the future of water in the UK. Today's episode is all about something that we often take for granted, the rain that falls out of the sky. But what if we could change or rethink the relationship that we have with it? What if instead of seeing this as a problem that we need to manage, we actually saw it as something that was actually a precious resource that we could harness and use in a much more effective way? This free natural resource lands on all of us after all. Our guest today is Matt Wheeldon from Wessex Water. Matt's the Infrastructure Development Director at Wessex Water and is a leading UK expert in the sustainable use of rainwater management, with over 30 years' experience as a chartered civil engineer. He's known for championing rainwater, using rainwater better, and particularly where it lands. So this is something that is significantly important given the new extremes of weather that we're likely to see going forward. So without further ado, let's make a start and we'll bring on the guest. So Matt, it's lovely to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today. I wondered if you could explain a little bit about the project that you've been involved with, because as I understand it, it was funded through the Ofwat Innovation Fund because it was seen as being something that the industry really needed to start considering, and is something that has obviously got a lot of attention and interest shown in it.
Well, Karen, thanks for having me on the Waterfall podcast. It's really exciting to be here. And yes, the Rainwater Management Platform is an exciting development in the world of managing our natural resources better. What it is, it's basically enhanced technical guidance on improving our relationship with rain. And when I say our, I don't mean water companies. I also mean highways authorities, local flood authorities, Environment Agency, property owners, landowners, everyone, because as you just mentioned, rain lands everywhere. And so the Rainwater Management Platform is taking what people consider to be the Bible of drainage. It's called the CIRIA, that's CIRIA, Construction Industry Research and Information Association. Their SUDS guidance, which at the moment is a 1,000-page document, is a huge book on everything to do with sustainable drainage, SUDS. And it's taking that hard copy, as it were, and saying, actually, one, it needs updating because it's 10 years old. It was last published in 2015. Two, you've got to pay for it, so it's behind a paywall. And three, is very, very, very light on the whole water reuse side of the rain equation. Too often we forget that rain is first and foremost a resource. And so what we're trying to do is bring balance to the drainage manual and call it a rainwater management platform. So what it's going to look like, it's going to be online. It's going to be free to use. It's going to be accessible to everyone. So we're going to make sure that depending on how you're entering the platform in terms of your persona, are you representing your property? Are you representing a highway? Are you representing a water company, et cetera, et cetera? There'll be a route in, and it'll be technical guidance on how you can manage rain better where it lands, both considering it, first of all, as a resource. How can I reuse this stuff? What is the best practice approach? And then how do I get rid of the surplus, i.e. the drainage side? So it's going to follow the two principles of good rainwater management, which is one, rain as a resource. We should be capturing it locally, reusing it where possible. And two, we should be returning it back to the environment as close as possible to where it first landed. So those two simple principles will kind of guide the Rainwater Management Platform. As you said, we've been given money from the Ofwat Innovation Fund. What is amazing about this project is the level of collaboration. So not only do we have every single water and sewage company in the whole of the UK and Ireland supporting it financially, that's a first. But also we've got support from loads of government departments, ENGOs, and then from the delivery perspective, we've got loads of different collaborators writing different parts of the platform, all the kind of big consultants that you'll be familiar with, Arup, Motts, Stantec, HR Wallingford, ACOM, and then down to sort of smaller, more bespoke contractors like Anthony McCloy Associates, Groundwork, EPG, and the list goes on. There are a huge number of collaborators. So this is truly collaborative, and it has to be, because rain is truly a sociable, a societal thing that affects us all. And so that's what's really exciting. So we're planning our first rollout will be next August, and we'll be testing it with the community who are involved in sustainable drainage and water reuse. And then the final product, as it were, which will be free to use for 5 years, will come in August 2027. So it's exciting times, but it's only one part of a much larger strategy that we need as a society to manage rain better where it lands.
And I presume that when our sort of drainage systems were first planned, it was all about getting the water, away and into watercourses as quickly as possible, which, in itself has presented problems for the industry, hasn't it?
Indeed. I mean, history is really important. It's really important to understand where we've come from. The first sewers didn't carry sewage. I'll just leave a pause there. The sewers were invented before the flush toilet was invented. So we've got to remember, the first sewers carried rain. That was their function. They were to drain the rain to the river. The flush toilet, although it was invented in the late 1700s, you were not allowed to connect your toilet to the sewers until 1815, when the government relented and said, okay, you can. And so suddenly we started adding sewage to the rain and then wondering why our streams and rivers started smelling. It's pretty obvious, really. And then 1858, the Great Stink, Parliament closes, and Sir Joseph Bazalgette kind of saves the day, and respect to him, but he didn't take the rain out. He didn't swap the rain and the sewage. He solved the problem, and as we all know, he didn't solve the problem totally, because we ended up with storm overflows, which is one of our biggest problems as a sector today, both from a perception point of view, but also how do we solve it point of view. So yes, sewers used to carry rain, used to go straight to the river. We recognise now, with this changing climate, we've got to manage the rain better where it lands, rather than trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And why get rid of something that's valuable? Answer, you shouldn't.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
creating that value is something that we struggle to do, because we've relied so much on centralized systems for providing all of our water demand. And yet the crazy thing is that the level of treatment required to get to drinking water standards is so high, and yet 30% of what we demand comes nowhere near our bodies. We stick it in our toilets and flush our poo away with it. And yet it's drinking water. So that's completely bonkers.
I completely agree. It seems ludicrous that, world-class drinking water, quality water is being used to flush our toilets.
It's bonkers. It's bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are steps, as I understand it, that are moving us towards a situation where that might no longer need to be the case. With the right, protections in place to ensure potable water is always available, it is going to be possible in the future, potentially, to use rainwater for those sorts of activities that don't require drinking water, quality water.
Yes, and they exist today, but the problem we have is we have two problems. We're running out of water. We've got water scarcity issues, and then we've got too much rain in the sewers, and we've got storm overflow and flooding issues. And they're all the same issue. They're all about a lack of management of rain. We rely on big storage reservoirs miles away from where we need the water, which is in our homes and our businesses, to collect in a small area enough rain for everyone. And then we pump it and treat it at a huge carbon cost. So to get water to our taps, we as water companies have to lift the water about, on average, 130 meters in the air to get every single litre to our taps. So if you're using 138 litres per person per day on average, that is the equivalent of lifting a kilogram weight 18 kilometers into the air per person per day. That's how much energy we use to get drinking water to our taps. What do we do with a third of it? We stick it in our toilet systems. It's bonkers, as we've just said, so that we forget the carbon footprint offsite of getting this really high quality product to our homes, and then completely misusing it, not through any fault of our own, but because of the way the infrastructure is built, in a terrible way. And yet enough rain lands on every roof to supply all of that non-potable need per year for that house, even in the drier parts of our country. This is the crazy thing. Even in East Anglia, if you had the right infrastructure, you could flush your toilet and water your garden with the rain that lands on your roof. But we don't, because what comes out of our taps is usually reliable and very cheap. That is changing as our climate changes, as we recognize the contamination in our environment, which we now have to remove from drinking water. The costs and the carbon footprint are going to go up, and we've got to change the way we build our infrastructure to recognize the future is very different to the past.
And you've raised a number of very interesting points, but I'm thinking as well that, sort of planning for the future, when we are likely to see the swings between very extreme weather conditions, so the really intense rainfall and those long periods of very dry weather, as we've experienced this year, it's almost sort of an attempt to future-proof, isn't it? Whatever happens, we will be prepared for that future.
And other countries are there because their climate has already changed to those extremes, and they've made that decision 20 years ago to change their infrastructure. So if you look at countries with greater extremes of climate, like South Africa and Australia, their policies changed years ago to recognize the value of what's landing locally. Whereas here, we haven't actually woken up to the enormity of the change. And yet, we know that as the climate warms, and it's warmed 0.8 degrees between 1960, 1990 and 1990 and 2020, rainfall has on average increased 7.3% over that, as that 0.8 degrees atmosphere has warmed, which is what we expect. But what we're seeing is we've just had the hottest summer on record by miles, and it keeps each year breaking these records. So you're right, we're moving from a climate of drizzle, which we all complained about, to one of drought and deluge. And believe me, we're going to wish we had a climate of drizzle. So what we've got to do as a nation is look to the future and the predictions of the future and change our infrastructure now. It's no good tinkering around with water fittings calculators to say, oh, we need more efficient flush toilets. No, we need a new supply of water for our flush toilets, and it's not drinking water. So we've got to take a bold step. And at the moment, I don't see that happening. I see, apart from in areas where tragically there is literally no water, where they're actually making those bold steps. I think we've got to make that bold step everywhere because the whole of our nation is water stressed. If you look at the official water stressed areas, it excludes the southwest. Well, it doesn't take long to remember 2022 when they were mobilizing desal plants down in southwest water because they'd run out of water. Don't tell me we're not water stressed in the southwest. So this applies everywhere. We have a network of water. So just because one area gets more rainfall than another area doesn't mean one area is water stressed and the other isn't. We are in our entirety water stressed. And I think we've got to make bold decisions now. And I say we, I mean government has got to lead on making these, predicting that where we're going to be in the future. Other nations like Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, they've already made those decisions. And they're like us in that their climate is changing, but they haven't reached those extremes that Australia and South Africa have. But they recognize the value of rain where it lands. And I don't think the UK has yet.
And in sort of practical terms, how do you harness the rainfall at that local level?
Great question. So you need a strategy that looks at all these different areas: legislation, regulation, education, economic incentives, and technical guidance. So the Rainwater Management Platform is kind of ticking the technical guidance, and the new hierarchy in the national SUD standards also recognizes the value of rain, because the new priority number one for rain is collect for non-potable reuse, which is brilliant. But we haven't got the legislation that supports that. So how do we practically do it as a society? I'll start at societal level first, is we mandate rainwater harvesting for new build. We mandate sustainable drainage for new build. That's really simple. We've made it really difficult, but actually that's what you've got to do. You've got to start with low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit is stuff that is not yet built. So let's change the way we build things. So let's mandate rainwater harvesting. Let's mandate sustainable drainage. Okay? I mean, you can't argue against that, what people do. And the reason they argue against it is because new infrastructure is a step increase in capital cost for the developer. What they don't recognize is that it is a step down for the consumer. It's an improvement for the environment because the carbon footprint reduction is enormous. Whilst we lift water 130 meters in the air to get to the tap, a local rainwater harvesting system will lift water 5 meters from the garden to a header tank in the roof. So you're comparing 130 meter lift with 5 meter lift. You tell me which is better for the environment. So we've got to change that. Regulation, it needs to change. We've got to recognize these issues are societal issues, not just water company issues. I'm often asked about, privatization, nationalization. I say to people, the worst thing about privatization is that people think that all water issues are water company issues, and they look to water companies to solve all these problems. Actually, the best place to solve these is often in society. So rather than just building big reservoirs or building big storage tanks for stormwater, actually we need to look at where the rain lands and where the water is demanded. And that is us as a society. So we've got to ensure that regulation of water companies enables water companies to solve the problems in the right place. And that is at the point of demand of water and the point of supply of rain. That is our properties. So if you imagine, if you could take that £50 billion water companies are about to spend on strategic resource options and the £56 billion we're about to spend on storm overflows and say, hey, don't spend it out there on centralized solutions, invest in the property. Wow, we could solve the problems at a fraction of the carbon footprint and the current direction of travel. And our carbon footprint is going northwards away from net zero at the moment because of the huge investment programs on centralized solutions, which involve storing, treating, and moving more of this heavy substance called water. And then on the other side of the coin, storing, pumping, and treating more of this other heavy substance, the rain. So, so the carbon footprint with shifting this water long distances is disastrous for our planet, and people aren't joining the dots. I often take a 25-litre can of water to the talks that I give, and I get a volunteer from the audience to pick it up. 25 litres weighs 25 kilograms. How many of those does everyone use each day? About 5.5 of these. And what I do is I get someone to pick it up. I generally pick a large, strong person, because lifting 25 litres above your head is not easy. So I say, right, lift it above your head, a 2-metre lift, I say, now, the equivalent amount of energy we've put into your drinking water is the equivalent of you doing that 358 more times per day. That's how much energy we put in to getting that drinking water to your tap. Now imagine reducing that by a third. That's what you could easily do if we weren't using drinking water for flushing our toilets and watering our gardens. You think of the energy saved by harnessing what lands on our roofs. It is so huge that, and people are just forgetting about these kind of the water company carbon footprint, which is our carbon footprint as a society. Everyone just focuses on the home. People tell me, oh yes, this home's net zero. No, it's not. Absolutely not. Not when you think of the carbon footprint of the water and the carbon footprint of the rain in the sewage, it certainly is not a carbon neutral homes. So we've got to think of that broader picture, and regulation needs to recognise that. Education is so important. Economic incentives are crucial. So at the moment, we can't get grants to manage rain better on our properties as property owners. I've just done it at my home because I have to practice what I preach. The payback time for me is 123 years. It's madness. It makes no economic sense for me as a property owner to invest in rainwater management myself because the water services I get are so cheap. So what we've got to do is do what we've done in energy, is introduce a grant system. So on your energy bill, Karen, you have a standing charge. It's probably quite large. It's probably about £1 a day, like mine. And that goes into a central fund such that others can draw down on that fund to get discounted solar panels, ground source heat pumps, etc., etc. So in other words, there's a recognition that energy resilience is a societal issue. And indeed, the National Planning Policy Framework talks about that. It talks about decentralized and low carbon solutions for energy. It also talks about using natural resources prudently, but it doesn't mention rain. It totally forgets that rain is also a natural resource landing on us all. And so the National Planning Policy Framework has missed what is so obvious, that we should be harnessing this natural resource that lands on our roofs and providing the economic incentives for people to be able to do that themselves. So a grant system, or the water company being able to come in and do it, because water companies can't. They don't have the powers to do that because it's my property. We've got to kind of channel the money. The money's there. It's just in the wrong pots, and therefore the wrong solutions are being delivered to hit these outputs of tackling water scarcity and storm overflows, but just in the wrong non-climate change proof way.
It's interesting what you were saying there about, the need for us to sort of look at this in a different way. What sort of measures have you introduced to your home?
So I'm on a combined system. My home was built in 1923, and downstream I've got a storm overflow, which my roof is contributing to. So what I did when I redid my drive, which I made out of permeable paving, I put a soakaway and took off the front half of my roof and put it in that soakaway. That cost me £3,000, but my saving off my bill is about £28 a year, hence the 123-year payback. The back half of my roof, I put through a water butt, which is a cubic metre, so it's a 1.8 metre high water butt. The takeoff from the bottom, I put through a little pump which pumps around my garden, and then when it's full, it overflows and goes down into the rest of my garden. So removing the rain from the combined sewer. Interestingly, Wessex Water have just built a big storage tank at the storm overflow just a few hundred meters from where I live. Actually, if they were able to have tackled the problem at mine and all my neighbours' properties, they wouldn't have needed to do that. Instead, all the rain they are now collecting in this big storage tank gets pumped 40 meters in the air and then is treated sewage works, which is about 9 kilometers away from where the rain first landed. It's bonkers.
It really gives some perspective, doesn't it, onto, into the way that, the system was clearly fine for many years, working within the bounds of the climate that we had at that time. But when you look to what we can expect to see going forward, this is going to really present the system with some real challenges, isn't it?
Yes, and it's
unless
not
we do make changes.
Yeah, it's not. There's also its expectation. Storm overflows have always existed, but the expectation is now that they don't. I say they've existed since we intersected the sewers and started treating the sewage. But we've got big drivers. The changing climate is the biggest driver. The public perception is a massive driver. Yeah. New homes, huge driver. 1.5 million homes. Every single one, we're going to build toilets and fill those toilet systems with drinking water. So, there are some obvious quick wins to this, but we don't seem to have woken up to the opportunities that doing things differently provide us with. That's tragic, but I would actually say it's negligent, and it makes me very cross that people are not waking up. We're not seeing the wood for the trees. And we are solving single problems without seeing the big picture. And which is why Sir John Cunliffe said we need a national water strategy, and that needs to include addressing net zero, as well as all these other issues like storm overflows and water scarcity. So we've got to bring the carbon footprint. Water is heavy. I mean, come on, that's obvious. But the implications of water being heavy is the more you move it, the bigger the amount of energy you've got to put into it. And we move water all over the place, needlessly. And that's just bonkers. So we've got to think local. We've got to think about what water we have landing on us. How do we reuse that? How do we not then send the waste or the surplus away? And it comes down to mimicking nature, really. It's not rocket science. I always present a slide of Introduction to Rocket Science book, and then I put a big cross through it and say, actually, it's Janet and John. It's a Janet and John. It's primary school level of understanding. It's not hard. What is hard is we don't have the leadership that is recognizing the big picture and coming up with an approach that addresses the problems at source. So source control. It's the same when you start talking about water quality issues, as well as what I'm talking about, which is water quantity issues. Source control, source control, source control. It's a bit like education. Source control, source control, source control. If we want to have a low impact on the environment, we've got to manage problems at source.
No, that's a really, really powerful point. And I wonder, to what extent the platform that you're producing, is going to be the sort of trigger for people to start thinking differently about these issues.
Yes, I don't think it will be the trigger, because I think people, the pennies in their pocket is often the trigger rather than environmental conscience. I think a few people is environmental conscience, but I think actually finances are the biggest way to influence people. So what the technical guidance will do, it will provide that platform of information, but it won't make you, it'll still cost an individual unless we can introduce a grant system, or unless the water companies can invest their own money in those solutions. I don't think it will make people go, suddenly, I'm now happy to invest in my own property. I think we need to change lots of other things, but we need that technical guidance that the Rainwater Management Platform is going to bring to be that go-to resource. Is really exciting. I was meeting with the authors last Tuesday, and we're kind of chunking up the parts, the kind of chapters. It'll be converted into a web-based process, but we're thinking in terms of chapters at the moment in our heads. But then using AI search tools to help people who are coming at this from different angles to pull back the information that they need. Technical guidance is one part, but it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve our problems. We've got to look at all the other things that need to change. And I think the biggest changes need to come from the top, through legislation, through regulation, through economic incentives. And then hey, we'll be protecting the environment through lower carbon emissions. We'll be being climate change resilient. So here's the crazy thing. Our solutions to storm overflows and water scarcity is got such high embedded and operational carbon. It's exacerbating the problem that we're trying to tackle, which is a changing climate. So we're in this kind of vicious doom circle of trying to solve the problem, but creating it at the same time. And then you add in new properties and it just gets bigger. So we've got to break this doom cycle that we're in. And I suggest the way we do that is we manage rain better where it lands.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good message for people to take away from this conversation. That we can all do our bit, can't we? I mean, I listeners to this podcast will know that I'm a great advocate of the water butt, and although that's a fairly modest contribution compared to the measures that you've introduced, it plays a part, doesn't it?
It plays a part. Yeah. And the water butt is the simple key connector between water efficiency and sustainable drainage. So my question to people, and I'm happy to answer this one, is when your water butts are full, where does the water go? So the overflow to the water butt is when it suddenly becomes a surplus and a drainage issue. So yes, we need water butts for reducing our demand, although it's generally just in the summertime rather than all year round. And then what do we do with the surplus? Because our rainwater harvesting system will be exactly the same. So a typical rainwater harvesting system, you would have maybe a 3 cubic meter tank in your garden. The cost of digging the hole is significant, but whilst you've got your diggers on site, it's a lot lower than then coming back and retrofitting one. You'd then pump to a header tank, maybe 80 litres in your loft, and that would then fill your toilet systems, which is about 25% of your daily demand, and also then provide that rainwater for your gardens. And gardens prefer rainwater than potable water anyway, so that's double bonus. And then recognising that in long droughts you might run out of rainwater, you then just have a backup drinking water that fills that header tank in your roof. Hopefully it won't be called on much, but as the climate changes, it might be called on more. But it's a lot better than every time you flush filling a toilet system with drinking water. I think it would. I think if you had a rainwater harvesting system, you'd feel like we do here in our office where I'm sitting at the moment. When you flush the toilet, you don't feel quite so guilty that you're using drinking water to flush away waste. Which is, I think aliens would think we're a mad. They came and landed on our planet and thought, what are you doing?
Sort of commercial developments that have already got rainwater harvesting for toilet flushing and things like that, haven't they? Yes. So it's reasonably tried and tested technology that we're talking about here, isn't it?
It's not high tech. It really isn't high tech. I mean, I hear a lot of people go, yeah, but what happens if you misconnect a non-potable pipe with a potable pipe? Well, gosh, I mean, we can colour the pipes and train plumbers and educate people. It's not going to kill you. It's not like cross-connecting a gas supply with water or something like that. I often hear people coming up with really lame excuses as to why we don't do it. I find it's quite pathetic, because all you need to do is have clear guidance and clear education. And the consequences of getting it wrong are not going to be catastrophic. We are talking about collecting. So rainwater is not clean. If you've got seagulls on your roof, it's not going to be 100% clean. But we're talking about flushing toilets with it. We're talking about watering our roses with it. We're not talking about showering in it or anything like that. So I think we need a can-do attitude of what can we do, and have two sources of supply of water to our homes, not just the one. And similarly on the drainage side, you have two means of disposal, one for the rain, one for the wastewater. Up until the 1960s, we just had one. And that's why we have storm overflows. It's a huge problem that needs unraveling, but how we unravel it, I think, really matters. These storm tanks I see going in, I'm thinking all of that extra rain is going to be stored, pumped and treated at huge carbon costs. And I'm thinking, I cannot let my legacy be allowing that to happen without challenging it and coming up with an alternative. Do you know wastewater treatment works treat between 1.5 and 1.8 times the amount of water we put into our system. So that extra 50 to 80% is rain spread over the year. That's going to go up. So the 50% is in a dry year, 80% in a wet year. As we store more to try and solve storm overflows, that's going to go up. So we're going to be treating more and more liquid on the waste side because we're going to be treating more and more rain. That is not acceptable in my mind. And we need a different approach to tackling storm overflows than the one we're currently doing.
That, it is staggering, isn't it, when you think you put it into those sorts of perspectives. I mean, I wonder whether, in addition to, as you say, the sort of, political will to do these things, whether, we've taken into sufficient account things like the highway runoff that, you mentioned earlier, because there are lots of ways that surface water gets into our present sewage system, isn't there?
Indeed. And there's complete breakdown in valuing the service here. The Water Industry Act precludes charging for water companies to drain highways. So we're providing a service free of charge. Well, if you're getting a service free of charge, what incentive is there to not have the service or to change the service? Absolutely none. So that's baked into law. It's absolutely preposterous that someone who's responsible for something is getting a free service from someone else. And the people paying for that service are you as a customer. So on your standing charge for your sewage bill, the rainwater charge, a good chunk of that is to pay for draining the highways. So the customer is paying, not the responsible body for the highways. So there's no incentive for the highways to say, let's take that off the combined sewer system. It needs treating, so we need to settle it out because it's got polyaromatic hydrocarbons and microplastics, loads of that kind of stuff in it. But let's not think that sewage works removes that. So people think, oh yeah, we need to send it to a sewage works because it's polluted. Sewage works don't remove the pollutants from highways because they're man-made. They're not organic stuff that breaks down. Microplastics don't break down; they break up. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons, sewage works don't treat those, and so there's this lack of education. All the sewage works will do is move this stuff into the biosolids, and then we spread the biosolids on the land. I mean, there's no joined up thinking here. So yeah, we've got to look at the water system holistically and see why it's broken as it is, and then how do we fix that? To send out price signals, to send out direction of travel, to understand the carbon footprint of what we're doing and the direction of travel of that. This is why we need a national strategy for managing rain. And it's bigger than water companies. It's so much bigger.
No, I think you've made some really powerful points. The other thing that I was thinking while you were talking was the level to which we can see the future of the expectations of consumers and customers of water companies influencing the rate of improvement that we're seeing in some of these areas, because quite clearly people have been, more than a little concerned about companies' environmental performance and the use of combined sewer overflows and things like that. We've been discussing the benefits that this different approach to managing rainwater could have for all those kind of added benefits. So, there really are some tremendous opportunities, aren't there?
There are, but if we have our eyes closed, as at the moment that we do, we are creating greater environmental problems than we're solving. If I explain myself on that one. So storm overflows are intermittent. The biggest problem with the organic load in storm overflows is the acute pollutant. Acute pollutants are things like ammonia and the biochemical oxygen demand. You tackle acute pollutants through dilution because it's all about the concentration. And the reason, therefore, that storm overflows have such a small impact on the environment is because of the dilution of the rain. The bigger problem is chronic pollution from continuous discharges and from agriculture. Just parking that to one side. If you're trying to tackle the environmental problem, the measured environmental problem from storm overflows is far smaller than people think in their heads because all they read is the headlines. When you look at the supporting data, it does not support that. And so now, because of the response to that perception, we are then rushing off building really quick solutions, and I mean stormwater attenuation tanks predominantly, to fix this perceived environmental problem. I say perceived, it's bigger. The perceived problem is bigger than the actual problem. But at the same time, the carbon footprint of the embodied and operational solution, the embodied and operational carbon footprint of these solutions is sending our carbon footprint northwards. So again, a lack of holistic thinking about what's the best way to solve these. So I agree we need to tackle storm overflows, but I don't agree we need to tackle them in the way we are currently tackling them. I think separation at source has to be driven by the government and regulators, and they have to be concerned about the solutions that water companies are delivering. And this all comes down to risk. We've been set these absolute targets, and the risk of failure is massive. And the consequence of failure is massive. And so companies will be risk averse. What we need is the ability to do the right thing and not get massively penalized if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So in other words,
Well, this is the argument for nature-based solutions, isn't it?
well, I mean, sustainable drainage solutions are nature-based solutions, but they have a slightly higher risk than bits of concrete. So yes, we need to do the right thing, but we need to have the ability, I guess, to fail hard targets without being completely hammered and actually see it as general progression towards the right solution. So we need to actually measure square meters removed of impermeable area from the combined sewer system, cubic meters captured for reuse. Those need to be part of the metrics. Yes, we are interested in spill numbers, but ultimately it's about environmental outcomes. What is the impact on the water and what is the impact on the air? Those are the two things that we should be focused on as primary targets, not spill numbers per year. I always tell people sewage works spill 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, don't they? Because they're continuous. So well, no one talks about that. So let's just recognize that it's not about spill numbers. It's about impact. And if we had regulation that was focused on impact and more focus on solutions rather than just outputs, we would be setting ourselves up for a much better future in terms of long-term costs, climate resilience, more fulfilled people as they get more engaged with water. I mean, the wins are endless. It is such a no-brainer. But we've got to join the dots. We being everyone's got to join the dots. The raindrops.
No, well, honestly, it's been fascinating talking to you about this, and we could go on forever. It is something that, is very close to my heart. I mean, we do ask all our guests that come onto Waterfall if they know what their daily water use is.
Yep.
In their household. And from what you've said, I'm expecting it to be really low.
Well, is it just you say that because my water bill is for the house rather than for me as an individual? And I have kids who are student age, so they kind of come and go. So I know that on average, my home is using about 300 litres per day, but the number of people in the home kind of varies between 2 and 4. So it's quite hard to answer kind of what my personal use is. I would love... So I don't think it's as low as yours, Karen. I think you are sub 50. I think I'm probably just about sub 100, but I can't demonstrate that.
I am a woman on a mission.
Right. Yes. And I'm a man on a mission too. And hopefully, my garden water usage, certainly, and I've only put in this rainwater harvesting system this autumn, actually. So I haven't actually seen the benefits of it. But hopefully when I've got that cubic meter of rainwater stored up, that'll be a cubic meter less I'm taking off the potable system. So yeah, I'm kind of just below 100, though, a step change would getting sort of down to 70, 80. I'd love to be able to get there with filling my toilets with rainwater. It's amazing. And if I get a grant to do it, even better.
Absolutely.
To build new homes like that, even better.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, there is, as you said at the outset, there is an opportunity with new builds, isn't there, to, develop them in a way that harnesses all these different technologies and innovations and, could potentially help with the longer term situation. But, there is already such a big stock of existing housing, isn't there, which is going to be much more challenging to retrofit.
Totally agree, Karen, but we're not even doing it for the things that are not yet built. So I always kind of pick my battles. Let's pick something to start with that is achievable. And we've really got to show people the scale, the magnitude of the problem and how it's going to get worse. And great that CC Water continually shout about this, as do many other organisations. We've got to shout about the dire situation that we're in and how it's going to get worse. And we've got to look at other places that have already gone through this, learn from them, and make strong leadership decisions on this. I think retrofitting, is crucial, but I think unless we can actually build new things correct, then we're kind of wasting our time. And on the retrofitting side, the benefits will definitely be on taking rain out of the sewers and garden use. I think opportunities for retrofitting inside properties for rainwater reuse is really limited because of the cost and the intrusiveness, but at least let's take the rain out of the sewer and stick it in the garden. So it's about creating responsibility for the rain that lands on myself. It's not someone else's job. When that rain lands on my roof, I am responsible for it. Interestingly, in Germany, where they've introduced mandatory sustainable drainage standards for properties, people have started going, oh, hang on a moment, I'm responsible for that rain. Why don't I use it? first. And so rainwater harvesting is growing very fast in Germany because people are responsible for the rain that lands on their property. It's not someone else's responsibility. It's mine as a property owner. And that's the kind of message we need to get out there, and then give people all the tools they need to manage the rain better where it lands.
Well, I think that's a really positive note to end on. So, Matt, can I just thank you for coming on to Waterfall, because it's been really fascinating talking to you about this subject. Good luck with the project going forward. It's going to be a tremendous sort of opportunity for people to come together on this topic. And I think, certainly if I've taken anything away from today, it's the fact that, we can all do our bit to really improve the way we are managing rainwater that falls on our properties. But also, as a society, we need to be rethinking the way we approach some of these issues. So thanks again. So we'll thank everybody for listening, and hope that if anybody's got any ideas for future episodes, they get in touch with us at the Waterfall podcast address. And if anyone would like to listen back to past episodes, we've got some really interesting topics that we've covered, so would encourage you to do so. And if you feel like it, offer up a review, and also please continue to subscribe. So thanks again to Matt, and we'll wish everybody a rain-fed future. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.